All right, jam everybody. Why don't we get started? So before I talk a bit about the message I sent yesterday about some of the changes in spending and org changes, wanted to just briefly give an update on sort of like development timelines. So the main thing on the docket at the moment is Silo V3, and it's taken a while. This really could have been 5 or 6 different BEPs, but found it easiest process-wise to combine it into one. So at the moment, Halborn's audit of the Silo V3 BIP will wrap up next week, but that is the first step of a handful that will need to take place before the BIP is proposed. The first of which is the development of the UI, which will take place over the next couple weeks. And given the amount of changes, particularly the migration from the old Silo system to the new Silo system, we'll want to do some fairly rigorous testing with the finished UI on top of the finished contracts, which we haven't spent as much time doing in other BIPs. So in addition, Cyphren plans to do like a code review of the PR a couple weeks from now for about a week. So it's a long-winded way of saying at the moment we're looking at proposing the BIP at the end of next month or so, and then I think as most folks are aware, assuming that BIP passes and is committed, that is when the unripe seeds change would take place. So things are happening on the Silo V3 front. After that, we're sort of wrapping up some remediations for the different audits of Basin, and then there's a little bit more development work to be done on the Basin integration BIP that whitelists the Bean ETH well. We'll likely also do a temp check of sorts for determining what the seeds per BDV rewards for that token, for that LP token should be, potentially changing the Bean3 Curve LP token seeds per BDV rewards as well, TBD on that front. So, in the meantime, feel free to drop any questions in the Barnyard chat or speak up, but we'll now talk a bit about the message I sent yesterday. So, starting today, June 1st, we Beanstalk Farms expect to be spending around $80K a month in fixed costs. So by fixed costs, I mean, fixed recurring costs. I mean, things like payroll, different software server costs. We have to pay for a handful of different services, but the overwhelming majority of that is payroll. Now, the DAO shouldn't expect that's how much we spend in aggregate. There are other things to pay for ultimately, like development grants for one-off things. One of the motivations for this change is to transition as much of the work as possible to grant-based development, paid upon completion or, at some point in progress. We have a feeling that, that will be much more efficient, both in terms of, incentive alignment on the part of the dev in terms of getting paid upon completion, but also in terms of timelines as well. So, it's hard to really estimate. Dev grants and things like audits are spiky in nature with regard to spending. But, I mentioned in my message, over the last 6 months, we've been spending, call it round up to like 300K a month in total across Beans and USDC, across everything from payroll to audits, grants, etc. And hard to say in a given month what the aggregate will look like moving forward, but I would expect it to be significantly less, call it half or between a third and a half as usual over the last few months. So there are a couple motivations. The first of which I just described, which was the incentive alignment front in terms of efficiency. With regards to moving work to grants. The other, which I also mentioned in the message, is, frankly related to the sell pressure. I think that, most folks that are regularly attending these DAO calls sort of all have an appreciation for the nature of the positive flywheel, positive feedback loops that are ingrained in Beanstalk, and artificial sell pressure tends to douse a lot of those fires as they pop up. And so, one of the motivations is how can we get to a place where we're minimizing as much artificial sell pressure as possible while not having a significant effect on, development timelines. And particularly as we approach this post Mayflower stage where I think the obvious Beanstalk native projects to be done are a bit fewer and farther between. I think it makes sense now and over the next few months to have a much leaner and meaner team. So that's the long and short of it. And as best as possible, I want to turn this into a discussion and answer any questions. I'll go ahead and start with, I think Pizza Man dropped a question in the governance channel, which I'll just address now, which is that they asked, so this extends operating runway from 2 months to 5.8 months without any additional raise. So at a high level, yes. Had we been spending what we were spending, we would have had enough beans to take us through the end of July without the need to propose another budget. So, that budget proposal would have been imminent. Hard to say exactly how much it extends the runway in the sense that, like I mentioned, dev grants are spiky, things change, but yes, based on the current structure of the team, how much people are being paid, if you extrapolate out that to, if you extrapolate that out to, far in the future, that would last until like October, November or so. So, one of the motivations is, giving ourselves a little bit of room to figure out some of these meaty questions with regards to what sort of team do we need post Mayflower to build the seed gauge system and such without the need to ask for more funding, because feel like asking for more funding without a lot of those questions being a little bit more clear would not necessarily be fair or the right way of going about things, in the sense that we don't have answers to some of those questions at the moment. So this gives us some more room, and this is not to say that there will never be another budget proposal again. It's really hard to say. On the farm in Beanstalk land, 6 months is kind of an eternity on some level. So I think we'll have infinitely more information about all of this stuff, within a couple months, and we'll be here at DAO meetings to talk about it. So with all that said, want to open it up as much as possible to any questions, and feel like there should be some. One other thing I'll add is, I mentioned Scribe in my message the other day. We think those guys were great, and the effort was apparent. And this does not have anything to do really with the Twitter accounts being suspended, but I feel like the output and value added just wasn't super clear. And I think on some level it's an interesting lesson, given that I think in the current state of the market, Beanstalk is rather uncool to talk about. So maybe there is some sort of marketing team or individual that would add a lot of value at the moment. Maybe it's also an intractable problem, at least while the bean price is not pegged. It's sort of unclear what that looks like moving forward, but feel like the decision to not continue the engagement was clear on our end, and happy to talk about that as well. And then, of course, this is not to say that we, Beanstalk Farms or the BFC or anyone, is like the arbiters of truth on what work should get funded, what work shouldn't get funded, who should get paid what, who shouldn't get paid what. There are processes for anyone to influence those decisions, and if any of them are unclear, happy to answer questions about that as well.
So, Guy, when you and I talked, I guess, real recently about this, there was discussion about the potential for other groups to potentially pick up development activity, here later in the year, maybe under a different structure, or, under some type of more formalized organization or something along those lines. I guess I wanted to ask this group, have there been conversations like amongst the dev team or or anyone else about like what that might look like?
Certainly some early discussions. I don't feel like it's even baked enough to feel comfortable like talking about it in this setting. But I will say, independent of any progression on like potentially other groups working on Beanstalk related stuff, independent of that, feel like the decisions made over the last week or so with regards to spending were the right decisions to be made regardless.
Yeah, admittedly, I agree with that. The other thing that's been going through my mind since we first talked about this, and we're starting to see it in the Discord too, is just I think we need to be real proactive about the idea that the project is not spinning down, dying, etc. Because that's going to be a hard narrative to fight. And I think that this group or the group of core contributors, or however you want to frame it, is going to need to be real clear that this is not, packing bags and turning the lights off. This is seeing what the next iteration is and orienting the organization towards that. So, just a thought more than a question, but just seeing that on the horizon.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that independent of any decision being made, there manages to be, the trolls find a way to FUD on some level. But definitely hear you on wanting to make it as clear as possible in terms of why decisions are being made and what is happening exactly. It's an interesting point around, it's like, what does it mean to wind down Beanstalk in a state where, from a development perspective, Beanstalk is, or at least from an economics efficiency perspective, Beanstalk is pretty good at doing what it was designed to do. And, hence, over the last 6 months, this is what Publius would talk about in class very often, about how, Beanstalk is approaching a state of, this is like an extremely naive statement that will be horrible to have on recording, but I'm going to say it anyway. Have Beanstalk approaching a state of being completed. A lot of the work to be done to get Beanstalk to be used will be on other protocols, whether exchanges like Basin, lending markets, etc. So it's like, does that mean we are not working on Beanstalk? Does that mean Publius is not working on Beanstalk? In my opinion, that's not what it means at all. But I could see how it might be perceived as that way. But yeah, I think that's the extent to which I have salient thoughts on that point.
Yeah, and I feel like that is that's really the message. Is that when I think about Publius's goal here that's been communicated a number of times, and they have expressed the thought that early on that they would kind of start this thing and be able to step away, and that is really, I mean, that is a pretty salient goal to create something
Well,
that is
yeah,
self-sustaining.
just to briefly interject,
Yeah.
it's like I am not stepping away. Publius is not stepping away. It's too bad they're not here, so we could have them answer that directly. But
Sure.
at least on this end, and can speak of them at least in the capacity of working with them. We're not going anywhere. So although things may be a bit more quiet on the farm, and the development work being done may not be, specifically a Beanstalk upgrade, I'm more optimistic and have more conviction than ever about the future prospects of what we're working on.
Well, and that's the message. I feel like that is an important part of that message. That this is not, again, just to use the phrase, this is not turning off the lights. This is settling into what the long-term vision looks like, which is something that, doesn't require nearly as much new product push as it does ensuring that things are stable and consistent.
Totally. I specifically wanted to make the distinction between, you alluded to this concept of Publius mentioning that the goal would be for them to not not be a significant contributor in the ecosystem, and feel like that is not a near-term goal for any of us.
And I'm glad you corrected me on that, because it's a very good point. And admittedly, it's something that until now, I would say wasn't completely sure. That's a really good clarification, even just for me, as we continue to have discussions in the general chat, and it seems like I'm having an enjoyable time pushing back against futters and all that. That's a good thing for me to know too. So no, I appreciate the clarification there.
You bet. Happy to take any more questions.
Hey, can you hear me, guys?
I can.
So I have a question about, so in the entire reduction, I guess, in expending and expenses, is that mostly due to, you think, less contributors, or like the pay cut you guys all decided upon? I guess following with that, what kind of pay cut did you guys even decide upon?
Yeah, it's a good question. To the former question, as far as which had a more impact of people not being on payroll versus taking pay cuts, and just to be clear, I feel like it is worth saying that anyone who is not in payroll, we had a fabulous time working with, and made it very clear that this is related to the transition to grants that I described earlier, that anyone who may not be on payroll anymore is at the top of our list of people to go to when, there are one-off, projects to be done. So just feel like that's worth being said. With regards to the question of whether the reduction in spending can primarily be attributed to people not being on payroll versus pay cuts, I feel like it's, probably pretty even, plus or minus 15%. It's hard to say. I don't have the exact numbers on that stat in particular, but I don't think it's overwhelmingly one side. As far as how much the pay cuts are, I think that all that information can be derived from people's original snapshot proposals and the table that's on the operations report as far as people's pay moving forward. Just to give a specific example and not be so vague, my original snapshot proposal was for 20,000 beans a month, and I'm now being paid 10. And if it isn't clear how to derive the what people are being paid now, just let me know.
Where is Publius?
Right now or in general?
Both, but right now as well. Seems like an important conversation.
Yeah, it's a fair call out. Right now, I'm not sure. In general, I spend a lot of my time working with them, although that may not be clear from, the more infrequent public meetings in the Discord, et cetera. But hopefully the couple things I mentioned earlier about, just to say it again, there's this, sort of like a head in the sky kind of idea of, them stepping away from contributing to the ecosystem very quickly, that I think could have been potentially true pre-exploit, but things are a little bit different these days, and don't think it's anyone's goal for them to step away, in any near-term capacity. So that's probably all I feel comfortable saying, or as far as speaking on behalf of them goes. But we should definitely get them in on the next one to field any questions like this. Realize that may not be a super satisfactory answer, but it is what it is. I would just add on that note that I think we are in this phase where most of their efforts are being spent on figuring out what the work to be done, or to put it succinctly, the long-term roadmap. Like after the seed gauge system, after Basin V1, etc. And I don't expect them to be shy about sharing once they have their feet under them a little bit more. Speaking for myself on that front as well. Any other questions? Red Beans, Chad, do you guys have anything you want to add?
I don't have anything. I think you did a good job covering it. So if anyone has specific questions about myself or design or what we're working on, happy to answer. But otherwise, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah. So on my side, the plan as it stands is I'll be spending the month of June working with the team on the Silo V3 UI in particular, and just helping wrap up the swath of things that need to get done for the Mayflower update. And then starting in July, we'll move to more of an advisor role where I'm around to think through things with Beanstalk Farms over the next couple of months as this sort of transition potentially to new entities or private companies happens, and possibly to do some sort of select work and upgrades, but predominantly will be focusing on other new projects of my own.
We love you, Silo, Chad.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, just gonna echo that, even though it goes without saying. Certainly would not describe it as Chad disappearing, but their contributions over the last year or so have been, hard to even calculate. So, a lot of my time is going to be spent figuring out, trying to plug all the holes, because there's a lot of holes that there's a lot of things that Chad helped out with, contributed to, led projects from end to end, and don't think they're going anywhere necessarily, but yeah, just want to throw out a word of appreciation for all they've done for Beanstalk up to this point. Rex, if you were talking, I don't think we could hear you.
I was just about to say, maybe a different way to put it, rather than holes to plug, is big shoes to fill.
That is a great way of framing it.
I'm not exactly sure if beans wear shoes.
That Lima Bean FT does have some big shoes. Alrighty, one other thing I wanted to mention was the DAO meeting will continue to, this time slot will continue to be open for people to take advantage of, and we'll continue having the Discord events that says DAO meeting is happening, I think. But Beanstalk Farms is going to start attending every other meeting, starting with this one. If there are things, a lot of questions pop up and people tag me, I'm always happy to join the other week ones. But otherwise, as far as Beanstalk Farms or me hosting it, will be every other week. And I guess one way we can make that clear is in the little descriptions for the Discord events. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that front. Alrighty, last call for any questions, input, feedback, etc. Going once. Alrighty. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.